Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful woman whose name was Doyin. She got married to a very handsome and wealthy man named Seyi, whose late father was a billionaire. Seyi inherited all of his father's wealth. He was everything that a woman would ask for: kind, generous, and deeply in love with his wife, Doyin, who only saw him as a money making machine. Doyin never loved Seyi. She married him for his wealth, and although he knew it deep down in his heart, he chose to ignore the truth. There was something about Doyin that made him fall madly in love with her, and Doyin, knowing this, capitalized on his love for her to get whatever that she wanted. She spent his money extravagantly, traveled as she pleased, and barely paid attention to her husband. Sheyi showered her with expensive gifts, luxurious vacations, and endless affection, hoping that one day his love would be enough to make her fall in love with him. But Doyin's heart was elsewhere. She was seeing someone else, a man named Tade, who was once a driver to her husband's late father. Doyin fell in love with Tade. He was her kind of man, spontaneous, unpredictable, and wild. His only setback was that he was poor, unlike Sheyi, who had so much money to spare. To Doyin, Tade's poverty was a small price to pay for the thrill that he brought into her life. He made her feel alive in a way that Sheyi never could. Their affair was reckless, passionate, and full of deceit. Doyin would make up excuses to travel, claiming that she needed space or time to clear her head, but in reality, she was spending days wrapped in Tade's arms. She would use Sheyi's money to fund their escapades, buying Tade gifts, dressing him in the finest clothes, and giving him a taste of the luxury that she enjoyed. Sheyi, blinded by love, refused to see the truth that was right in front of him. His friends and family tried to warn him, whispering about Doyin's infidelity, but he dismissed their concerns, believing that if he just loved her enough and gave her whatever she wanted, she would eventually come around. But fate had other plans in store for them. One evening, this was on the day of their anniversary, Sheyi returned home early from his trip. He planned on surprising Doyin with a romantic dinner for their anniversary, but when he got home, she was nowhere to be found. Curious, he checked her wardrobe and noticed that some of her clothes were no longer hanging in the wardrobe. He called her phone repeatedly, but Doyin did not answer. Sheyi, for all these months, suspected that Doyin was cheating on him with Tade. He had always suspected, but tried not to dwell on it, seeing how much he loved her. Tade once worked for Sheyi's father as his driver. He served their family for years, but was laid off following Sheyi's father's death. However, Sheyi had no idea that the woman he married was having an affair with his father's driver Tade. He immediately rushed off to Tade's house to confirm his convictions. He pulled up by the entrance of Tade's house, his heart beating as he sat in the car, waiting, hoping that his convictions were false. He sat in the car for some minutes, staring at the lights in the window. A voice in his head tried to convince him to leave, but Sheyi needed to know the truth. Just as he sat there, he caught sight of his wife Doyin in Tade's arms. His heart shattered as he pondered on what to do. His eyes met with that of his wife Doyin, who stood there shocked to see that her husband was parked outside Tade's home. Filled with so much anger, Sheyi switched on his car and began to drive home. The whole scenario replayed in his mind as he cried profusely, questioning what he had ever done to deserve such a betrayal from the woman that he loved. He sped home as tears poured down his eyes. Sheyi then swerved aggressively and was hit by a very huge truck whose brakes malfunctioned. The crash was so devastating as the truck slammed into Sheyi's car with a force that sent it spinning off the road and into a ditch. Sheyi's world went black in that instant. He went into a deep coma and woke up a few days later to find himself in the hospital. Shocked and confused, Sheyi wondered where he was. He looked around and caught sight of a very beautiful woman who was lying on the next bed in the ward. Sheyi could not place where he had seen her face before. He lay there confused when his wife Doyin rushed into the ward, feigning excitement. She had no idea how he would react, knowing that Seyi was now aware of her affair. She approached his bed and noticed the way that he looked at her. Seyi had a blank look in his eyes. He stared at her like a stranger, and Doyin was so confused as she had never seen him this way in her life. With a frown on his face, she asked Doyin a question that she never saw coming. Who are you? He asked Doyin, who froze in shock to hear such a question from him. It's me, Doyin, your wife, she said to Seyi, who shook his head slowly, his expression unreadable. I don't know you. I don't remember you, he said bluntly. The words hit Doyin like a slap as she stumbled backwards, her mind racing. How could he not remember me? How could he not remember our life together? She reached out to touch his hand, but she recoiled, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Don't come near me, he said sharply, as Doyin stood there shocked, the gravity of the situation dawning on her as she realized that Seyi had now lost his memory. The accident had stolen more than just Sheyi's health. It had stolen his memories, his past, and the love that he had for her. But Doyin did not mind. She saw it as a blessing, knowing that she never loved him to start with. She was now at liberty to frolic with her lover Tade, whilst remaining married to Seyi for his money. Doyin saw this as a win. She left the hospital with a strange sense of relief. To her, Shei's current condition was a blessing in disguise. He didn't remember her, their marriage, or even her betrayal. She was now at liberty to live her life as she pleased, free from the guilt of her past actions. Doyin maintained her luxurious lifestyle, funded by Sheyi's wealth, while secretly continuing her affair with Tade. Seeing the condition of her husband and the fact that Seyi knew of her affair with Tade, Doyin had to secure her future. She could not risk losing everything once Seyi regained his memory. So, while Seyi was still in the hospital, Doyin sold off some of his valuables, including their wedding rings. She gave all of the proceeds to Tade, who promised to get a house for them in another city. Doyin knew that it was only a matter of time before her marriage to Seyi ends. She decided to act fast to ensure that she secures some money for herself before Seyi finally regains his memory. However, what she did not know was that life had a way of unraveling even the most carefully laid out plans. Seyi remained in the hospital as his recovery was slow. He didn't remember Doyin or anything that had happened in the past. He was a blank slate, and the doctors advised Doyin to be patient with him. They even advised her on things that she could do to help him regain his memory, but Doyin had no intention of ever doing so. She didn't want his memory returned because if he ever remembered the truth, her life would fall apart. And so, Doyin continued her charade, playing the devoted wife in public whilst ripping Seyi off of his wealth. She maintained the perfect balance, ensuring that Seyi remained clueless while she enjoyed her double life with her lover Tade. Seyi, however, made friends with a woman who was admitted on the same night that he was rushed to the hospital. Her name was Lola, and she was a warm-hearted, intelligent woman who had survived a terrible accident herself. Lola had been in a hit-and-run accident, and although she was recovering well, she still had visible scars from the ordeal. Unlike Doyin, who only saw Seyi as a source of wealth, Lola treated him with genuine kindness. She spent time with Seyi, trying to make him remember all that he had forgotten. Lola could not understand why his wife Doyin did what she did. She tried speaking to Doyin about Seyi's condition, but Doyin warned her to mind her business. What kind of a busybody are you? To poke nose into the business of my husband? Are you now his side chick, trying to push me to the corner to take my place? Lola was taken aback by what Doyin said. She decided to keep her distance, but deep down, she knew that something was definitely wrong. There was a coldness in Doyin's eyes, an unnatural detachment that made Lola suspect that she had something up her sleeves. Doyin walked away from Lola and never looked back. She arrived at their mansion and decided to go into Seyi's father's room, a room that she never dared to enter for all these years. Seyi locked up his late father's room and warned her never to enter. Doyin could not resist the urge to see what was inside the room. She believed that the room was packed with valuables that could make her a fortune. So Doyin defied her husband's orders. She got the keys of the room from Seyi's own room and went on to open the door. The dust hit her nose as she let out a very loud sneeze. Doyin walked into the room, which looked untouched from the last time that she was there. This was a few weeks before Seyi's father gave up the ghost. He was extremely sick and Doyin had come to check up on him. Their encounter on that fateful day was one that Doyin would never forget. Seyi's father, Chief Bode, had his reservations about her. He never wanted Seyi to get married to her, but Seyi, blinded by his love for her, went against his father's wishes to marry her. Doyin could remember how Seyi's father warned his son that he would only marry Doyin over his dead body, and true to his words, he died a few months before their wedding. Doyin was so glad that his father died. She knew he never liked her and could not imagine going against such a powerful man. She knew she was marrying Seyi because of his money and knew that his father would never let that happen if he was alive. Doyin glanced around the room, searching for anything valuable. She caught sight of a box at the far end of the room. She rushed towards the box and realized that it was locked. She had never seen the box before and had the strong feeling that it held something valuable. She searched through the drawers and cabinets, hoping to find the key, and after several minutes of frantic searching, she finally found it tucked inside an old book in the cabinet. A wicked smile spread across her face as she unlocked the box. Inside, she found stacks of documents which seemed to draw her attention. Doyin's heart raced as she saw a folder that had her name clearly written on it. It was from a private investigator who Seyi's father hired to look into her life before he died. With trembling hands, Doyin read through the document as her face drained of color. Seyi's father had suspected her all along. He had ordered an investigation into her past before she even married Seyi. The files contained proofs of her lies, her past life, and even her relationship with Tade, his driver. But what terrified her most was a final note which sounded like a warning to her. If Doyin ever betrays my son, she will lose everything. A deep sinking feeling settled in her stomach. She rummaged through more documents, only to find that Seyi's inheritance came with a clause stating that if Seyi ever filed for divorce due to infidelity, or if he ever proved that Doyin was unfaithful, she would walk away with nothing, not a single penny. Doyin's hands shook violently as reality crashed down on her. She had been playing a dangerous game all along and was about losing everything that she thought that she had. Her mind raced as she thought of the day of the accident when Seyi caught her in the arms of Tade. The thought of losing everything sent shivers down her spine as she thought of what to do. As she stood there in the room, she received a call from the hospital informing her that Seyi had just regained his memory. Her entire body went numb as her phone nearly slipped from her hand. The words echoed in her head repeatedly that Seyi had regained his memory. She called Tade immediately, informing him of Seyi's recovery, and Tade advised her to take whatever that she could lay her hands on and meet him in his house so that they could elope together. "We have no time, Doyin. Hurry," he said as he hung up the phone. Doyin quickly grabbed everything that she could find, cash, jewelry, anything of value, as she stuffed it into a bag and headed straight to Tade's home. She drove like a mad woman through the busy traffic, her mind spinning with the weight of her downfall. She called him one more time to inform him of the items that she had in her possession, and Tade informed her that he was waiting. She arrived at Tade's house after what felt like an eternity and met the door slightly open. Doyin could feel that something was off. She hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. "Tade," she called repeatedly as she wondered where he could have gone. She stepped into the house, scanning the entire place for Tade. The whole place looked scattered. like one which had just been abandoned. Her stomach twisted into knots as she rushed into the bedroom to confirm her fears. The wardrobe doors were open, with Tade's clothes all gone. No, 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 she muttered, her voice rising in hysteria. She pulled out her phone and dialed his number repeatedly, but Tade did not answer the call. She left messages for him, and by the time she dialed his number again, the line was now switched off. Doyin could feel her breath quicken. She turned around, searching the room for any sign of where Tade could have gone. Just as she walked towards the center table, she came across a single sheet of paper on the table. Her hands trembled as she picked the paper up. At first, it seemed like a simple note, but as she began to read the contents, fear gripped her entire being. You are nothing but a walking corpse. Better go prepare for your death. Her blood ran cold as she read the warning over and over. Her fingers clutched the edges of the paper as her eyes caught sight of another document on the table. It was a medical report of Tade. Doyin could feel her stomach lurch as she read the words printed on the report, which revealed that Tade was HIV positive. Doyin stumbled backwards as tears began to pour from her eyes. Her mind reeled as she tried to process what this meant for her. So many questions ran through her mind as she wondered how long he had known about his sickness. Had he given it to her? Doyin let out a loud scream, her hands shaking as the horrifying realization sank in. She had slept with Tade over and over, and most of it was without protection. Tade had ruined her life and decided to leave her at the worst time possible. All the wealth that she had chased for years, all the deception she had built her life upon, was all for nothing. A wave of shock coursed through her as she wondered what she was going to do. Tade had gone with all the money, their plans for a future dashed, as Doyin was left to face the consequences of her actions. For the first time in her life, Doyin realized that she had lost everything. She couldn't let Seyi get to her at this time, not after all the things that she had done. After all, she still had some money and valuables in the car, so Doyin decided to run away alone to start her life afresh in another city. She got into her car and was about driving off when a group of masked men surrounded her car and took her away. Doyin struggled with them, but the men sprayed something on her face that made her to fall asleep. She woke up a few hours later to find herself tied up in an uncompleted building. Tade had hired some boys to pick her up, seeing that she had some valuables in her possession. His greed made him decide that Doyin was no longer useful to him except for the money and valuables that she had in her possession. He had no intention of running away with her. All he was interested in was ensuring that he took every last thing that she had left. Doyin's head pounded as she blinked rapidly. The scent of damp cement filled the air, and the faint flickering of a single bulb barely illuminated the space. Her hands and legs were tightly bound with ropes, and fear crept up her spine. Doyin struggled against the ropes, her heart racing as she heard voices approaching. Tade walked in, dressed in a dark hoodie, his expression void of any form of remorse. Behind him were two of his accomplices, who were also dressed in black hoodies. "So, you thought you could run off without sharing, huh?" Tade said as he crouched in front of her. Doyin's throat was dry as she shook her head frantically. "Tade, please, we were supposed to do this together. Why are you doing this?" Tade let out a short laughter, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, Doyin, you are so naive. You really thought I was going to stay with you? Or did you think I was in love with you?" He chuckled. "No, my dear, I was in need for the same thing that you were, for the money, and now I have no use for you." Tears filled Doyin's eyes as she realized the depth of his betrayal. She had destroyed her marriage, ruined her life, and now the one person she thought she could rely on had now turned on her. Tade reached for the bag she had brought, rummaging through the valuables and pulling out wads of cash, jewelries, and documents. "This will do," he said with satisfaction before turning to his men. "Make sure she doesn't leave this place alive. he said as Doyin gasped in horror. Tade, please, you can't take everything. Just let me go, she pleaded, her voice cracking. But Tade had already turned his back on her. As the two men tried to approach her, they were surrounded by the police, who ordered them to freeze. Drop your weapons and put your hands in the air, the police said as chaos erupted. Tade and his men attempted to flee, but it was already too late. Armed officers swarmed into the building and tackled Tade and his men, who were all taken into custody. Doyin sat there shaking as an officer rushed to untie her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized that she had narrowly escaped death. As she was helped to her feet, she looked around in shock. How did they find me? She whispered, and a familiar voice answered from behind. Tola stepped into view, her arms crossed but expression firm. I did, she said, her eyes locked onto Doyin's. I followed you from Seyi's house. I knew something wasn't right, and now the police know everything. Doyin's face paled as she realized the full extent of her downfall. She had lost her husband, she had lost her lover, and now she was going to lose her freedom. The officers dragged Tade and his men to their feet, placing them in handcuffs. One of the officers then turned to Doyin. You're coming with us too, Mrs. Seyi. We have a lot of questions for you. Doyin's knees buckled. She had spent years manipulating, deceiving and scheming her way to wealth, and now it had all crumbled in a matter of hours. As she was led out of the building, her mind flashed back to everything she had done. All the betrayals, the lies and the greed. This wasn't how it was supposed to end, she thought to herself as she began to weep. Seyi regained his memory and was heartbroken to see all the terrible things that Doyin had done to him. He filed for divorce as he let Doyin face the consequences of her actions. Months passed and the case against Doyin and Tade gained widespread attention. The media followed every detail, exposing the betrayal, fraud and attempted murder. Doyin sat in her cold prison cell, staring at the grey walls which had now become her reality. The silk sheets, luxurious vacations, and expensive jewelry were all gone. She had lost everything, her freedom, her wealth, and any chance of a life that she once coveted. Tade was also behind bars, but unlike Doyin, he had already accepted his fate. Meanwhile, Seyi slowly rebuilt his life. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but as the days went by, things became easier. He ran a HIV test, which came out negative, and Seyi was so delighted to be free. Lola, the kind-hearted woman who had helped him in the hospital, remained a constant support to him. They spent time together, and over time, what started out as friendship grew into something deeper. Seyi finally asked Lola to marry him, and she agreed in a heartbeat. That was how Seyi got married to a woman who not only reciprocated his love, but cherished and respected him in a way that Doyin never did. Their wedding was a small but beautiful event, surrounded by true friends and family who had stood by Seyi through his darkest times. Lola was everything Doyin wasn't: kind, selfless and devoted. She didn't care about his wealth, she cared about him, and for the first time in his life, Seyi felt truly loved. The lesson to be learned from this story is that the love of money is the root of all evil. Greed is like trying to fill a bottomless pit which can never be filled. Therefore, we should learn to appreciate whatever we have and be contented, because chasing after wealth at the expense of integrity, love and loyalty will only lead to one's destruction. At the end of the day, true wealth is not measured by material possessions, but by the love, trust and peace we have in our lives. I hope you enjoyed the story.